Hello. In this video, we'll be looking at different storage options for data within the Bosbec platform in order to save and access data collected for reuse and not only for while running active workflows. The first data type are units that you can save with an associated key and value. It can be used as a data storage entity where we store a value such as a temperature and a name, possibly representing a sensor, for example. But it can also be used as a recipient associated with an email channel or telephone channel for sending messages to. The value only has an active state, so if you want to keep track of data and time, then using data log is a better option. This is our second example. Every data log has a key that it is saved with, and within it is a list of various log posts or items. The benefit of this option is that it has a value and a log time so that you can follow this over time and allows for calculating averages such as highest and lowest. This is a good option for following accumulated data over time. Note that the value doesn't necessarily have to be a number. It could be pretty much whatever you choose. Then we have the file library where you can store various file types. This is usually used for importing or exporting data from other systems. For example, you could have imports from an AD or maybe a contact list from which you could then import their contents as units. Or you could collect all of the units here and export them to another system. I've created an example where we pretend that we have a temperature sensor in a refrigerator that we want to track over time, and we'll need to save some values to do that. To do this, I've created three API collectors, where one is for reporting the current state. We have another for collecting the statistics and values from the sensor, and we have one for exporting the data, creating a file, and sending to a recipient. Like we did in the previous videos, we'll collect from the request and add it to a resource. We'll take the data from the request and add it to the metadata so it's available during the process. The request looks like this, and we'll submit 4 degrees and the name of the sensor. In this section of the workflow, we look for an existing unit with this name in a specific group, where I've saved all of the sensors so the information gets stored in the group. So we look for the same name, and if it's there, add it to the sensor. If we don't find one, then we'll have to create one with this sensor name and put it in the resource sensor. In the next instance, we'll save it to the group so it's in the account, and then regardless of the value, it will update this resource with the current temperature. In the next step, we'll log that the current value is this and add it to the log key with the sensor name. Then we're back to the sensor ID as earlier. It was successful. Then we have the stats section, where we do a search for the current value. We call up the unit where it is collected and saved to a resource. We then extract the current temperature and add it to the metadata. In order to collect the stats, we enter what time period we're interested in. Then open the data log. We need the time frame in order to calculate, for example, average value. In this data log item operations job, there is a step called calculate stats. So we simply prefix it with log and say that it's a number. Then we answer with this information. I can show you an example of how it works when we test it. We can change the temperature to 6 degrees on sensor 1 and 3 degrees on sensor 2. And it responds that everything is okay. If we want to run the statistics for these, then we send sensor 1 and receive the response that the temperature is 6 degrees, which it received from the unit as its current state, while the min, max, average, and count are retrieved from the data log. Here we can see that the average temperature is 4.1 or 4.2. If we send sensor 2, we get the following results since we have only run it once. Now if we go to Groups and Sensors, we find a new unit. Sensor 1 is currently at 6 degrees and sensor 2 is at 3 degrees. In the data log, there are currently 2 entries, sensor 1 and sensor 2. If we take a look at sensor 1, we see our recent log with 6 degrees. A log for sensor 2 was also created, and here we see 3 degrees. Now, if we're going to create a file, I've created a request that specifies which sensor I'm interested in and which email address the file gets sent to. Similar to what we did earlier, I'll put the data log for a specific time frame, in this case, the last 24 hours, and it gets sent to resource. In the next step, we loop the action for each resource and save the data in the file format that you want it. We want a CSV format, so we can put that together here. When the request is ready, we add the headers date, time, and temp, and create a file name. In the next step, the file is created and will reside in both the workflow and the account. When the file is created, we'll go to this job and search for the email address that we designated in the request. Retrieve it and add it to the temporary group. In this way, we created a channel unit that we can use for communicating with someone. In this template, we've defined that we're interested in all of the files in this workflow. We've done that by putting an asterisk in attached files. Then we're back and we'll check that everything is okay. So if we send the request, we can see it here in job execution stories, and it's done one execution and sent a message to one unit and created one file. We can examine the file via the admin panel by going into Files, and here we see the file. We can download it and open it. Here we see the log entries for the last 24 hours. That's one way to store information. There are actually 3 different ways to store information, and they all have different use cases. Generally, it's easiest to save the information in units where we're more interested in static details and current state. It can be, for example, a name that changes where we're more interested in knowing what the name is today and not yesterday, in which case units is the best choice. But if it's over a longer period of time, then maybe a data log is a better option, especially if older information is important. And files is the classic management format. That's it for this episode. In the next episode, we'll review what we've learned in the past episodes, as well as look at different ways that you can digitize your current processes. Please visit bosbec.com to learn more about our company and services. There you can also find additional guides and tutorials, as well as contact alternatives for questions and technical support.